Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make an analog NES Max controller. This uses a Xbox 360 analog stick. The NES Max controller has a slider on here, which is okay sometimes, but you gotta grease it up with silicone grease on the bottom if you want it to actually work properly. It's kind of finicky. It doesn't snap back to position, so whatever position that you leave it in is a position that it stays, but also, most importantly, it doesn't work without any pressure from your finger, and it doesn't really work very well. So I figured I'd bring this into the modern era and give it an upgrade with a analog stick. So let's go ahead and get started. First, you have to take apart the NES Max. Pop this out. And there it is. So this works just like a D-pad, like I said before, and then you got all your buttons. This is kind of dirty, so we're going to clean that up as well. But the very first thing that you have to do is to get the analog stick to fit in here, we have to cut out this center portion here because the analog stick is actually going to be going through there. So what I do is I take a permanent marker, flip it over, and you can see the outline right there where the plastic of the NES Max controller supports this circuit board right here. So you don't want to cut that out because you'll lose your support and structural rigidity of this circuit board. So what you're going to do is you're going to trace just to the inside of that line. Now, don't worry about these on the other side, these pads, the directional pads. Really, the only thing we got to worry about is there's a few circuits up here that are in control of like the power and the signal that go to the NES, and we don't want to cut through there. So really, ideally, we want this line to come to about here. So if I flip that over, I'm just going to trace this out. See in here that square needs to be able to fit through that hole, and it looks like I may have drawn that a little bit too small, so I'm just gonna widen that up just a little bit. Next thing we gotta do is we have to Dremel that out. So make sure you wear eye protection, ear protection. I have just those diamond bits on there. Just sharpen the end so I can start this hole. I don't have this thing turned up all the way, but it eats through this fiberglass pretty good. Okay. So, as you can see, I just missed this trace right here. Worst case scenario, say you cut through this trace right here. It's really easy to fix. If you follow it down, you can see where it connects to on top of here. You can solder a wire up here and then just follow that trace up there. And I believe that connects to it's actually the white wire. So you can just solder it to there, either on the back or on the front. So it's no big deal. I've had to do that before when I'm making these when I cut that too big. But let's see if this fits. All right, that fits pretty good. Okay, one last thing that you need to know is if you can see this micro switch right here, you can hear that. That needs a spot because that's actually how that switch is activated. And the way that I make these, I connect it to select. So we need to make sure that there's a spot for that. So right, looks good. That fits in there real nice. The next bit is we need to get the NES to be able to read the signal from the analog stick. You have these potentiometers on the side here. So when you move this around, this changes the resistance value that talks to the Xbox 360 and says, hey, this is how much we're seeing. That means that relates to the X and Y coordinates of your analog. The NES can only read up, down, left, right. So we need to change these potentiometers to send on and off signals to the NES. So when you hit a direction on the NES, it just closes a circuit and it tells that the NES that circuit is closed, and you can have two circuits closed at once. So you can have up, down, left, right, and that's just one, or you can have your diagonals. That's going to be two circuits, and so on. So what we need to do is we need to pop these potentiometers out of here. Oh, just in front. It's kind of hard doing this on camera. Okay. And here we have the potentiometer. Inside of here you can see the strips of carbon right here that change the resistance value that the Xbox 360 can read. And then down here is where the power gets sent, and then it sends it through there and the corresponding value is interpreted. But like I said, the NES can't read those signals. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to hack this to send off and on signals to the NES. So what we have to do is we have to remove some resistive material inside of there, some conductive material right in the center. Now this is really tricky to get right. Now if you don't get this right, if you don't scratch off the right amount, you're either going to have a controller that's way too responsive, meaning it might be hitting directions when you're not doing anything at all, or you just barely move it and a direction hits. The other downside of that too is if you take off too little, say you're hitting right or left on a game like Mario or any other side scroller, it'll also see up and down, so it'll be a diagonal, so you'll be ducking when you don't want to, or it'll be too hard to hit the direction that you want to hit. The other side of that coin is if you make this too big, your diagonals will be really hard to hit as well. And I designed this controller with games like Jackal, Space Shooters, Gun Knack, Heavy Barrel, games like that in mind, top-down stuff where you really can benefit from really easily hitting diagonals. So I've talked enough about this. Let's go ahead and remove this material. You can see this little white tab at the bottom here. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to trace along that white tab all the way up where you can kind of see it through that material. And I can kind of see this on video, so I know you can see it at home. But I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you what that looks like once you get it done. Okay, so I had to do this off camera just because I had to get really close to it. But there you go. So you can see that I scraped that material away just enough. So I just took out that little, it almost looks kind of like a triangle right there at the top, and scraped that all away. So that creates our open circuit right there, and that's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and finish this off. So once you've got that conductive material scratched away on these, what you can do is we're going to go ahead and tin the tips of these. Alright, now we're going to get these wired up. First thing we're going to do is, there's a little color code that I like to use. And left is orange, right is green, up is blue, and down is purple. So let's cut a piece of these off. Strip away one end, because the other one we're going to be cutting to size later, so there's no sense in stripping it. Alright, so we got those stripped. We're also going to need to make a jumper. This is actually a little bit long. This is from another one I was working on, so we're going to cut this down. What's that, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches? You can always trim it down later, so we'll cut this down to size, and we'll set that aside for now. Let's tin the tips of these. Okay, now we need to get these wired up. So let's think about this configuration here. And this is like this. Up is going to be completing this circuit right here. So up is going to be on the right, and then left. Obviously, it's completing the circuit to the left, so left is going to be on the left. So it's going to go left, right, down, up, and those center ones are going to be the power. Okay, those are pretty good. Now, let's connect these with a jumper. All right, there's one. Just check the connection, make sure it's not shorted or anything like that. And then I'm gonna strip this end off. There we go. And then solder that to this other one right over here. Okay, so there we go. We got that all taken care of. Now it's time to mount it. We need to break off or cut off these right here. That's good. And then we're going to cut off this corner. I'm gonna cut off this corner as well, just a little bit. There we go. And then I'm gonna kind of cut a little bit of this material off right here. There we go. So the reason for this is I'm gonna fold these up so we can solder to them. I'm actually gonna take this one, I'm gonna bend it out of the way just in case we mess up and need it. So we need to put power on this end, we need to put power here, and we need to put a gray lead here, which is gonna be select. All right. Get these all tinned. That's good, that's secure. Let's get our jumper. That's good. Select. So, there we go. That's how that should look. Now we can install the potentiometers, but we need to make sure that we put these pieces, but we need to put those back in there. They just pop right back in the center. Install them back on your analog housing. Make sure that this metal piece actually clips into the center of that. That looks good. That looks good. All right, the very last connection that we have to make on this piece is this last jumper here. And we gotta bring it over to this potentiometer right here. So it's real close, so you can make it really short. But that looks pretty good. So I'll cut that right there. Boop. So the easiest way I found to do this is actually to take these two wires, and we're gonna strip them back just a little bit more. Twist them together. Solder them together, and then solder them to that center piece of that potentiometer right there. So I'm gonna bend that up just a little bit just to get it to contact. Boom, baby. We're in business. So, I know it looks like a mess of wires right now. That's kind of because it is, but in a minute, this will be how we control that NES Max. So the next thing we gotta do is we gotta make some modifications to the shell right here. So if you can see how this is gonna sit in here, we need to have an out for the wires to come out of here. We gotta have an out for the wires to come out over here as well. We can also cut a little slit up here for the power wire to come out for when we tap into the power. So, but for now, let's just cut out the bottom. So you don't want to cut out too much material, but you want to make it pretty much as wide as that potentiometer right there. So I'm going to cut some directly out of the bottom. Now, since we're not pressing into this part of the board anymore, since there's going to be an analog stick here, you know, you don't need to be too afraid of cutting this material out of here, but you don't want to cut so much out that, you know, your board is wobbly in there or anything. So don't be afraid. Remember, you're improving this. Some people scoff at modifying original stuff, but we're making it a little bit better, so it's okay. Looks pretty good. Let's see how this fits. So I'm going to bend these pins on these potentiometers up. So we got to get all that to fit in there. So we just got to clean this up a little bit. And would you look at that, it all fits. I'm actually going to cut a little slit up here too for this power wire to come out of. Boop. And then right there too. So there we go. That fits real nice in there. Now we got to get our hot glue gun out and we got to get this set in place. You want to make sure this is like as centered as you can get it. I'll be 100% honest, I eyeball it every single time, but it's always come out okay. So that's okay. We don't need to take any crazy measurements or do anything like that. So let's get the hot glue gun out. Okay, so we want this to sit inside of this controller as low as possible. So we don't want to put any hot glue underneath of it. So we're gonna have to put the hot glue around the analog stick. And that actually kind of has another benefit too. It's not gonna shift left or right. And we also can make sure that it's centered in there. So I'm just gonna eyeball this. And you know what? That looks pretty damn good, and pretty damn good is good enough for me. So I'm just gonna throw some hot glue in here. Just go all the way around. Fill that up there. And I like to hit this corner too. So boom, boom, there we go. And then make sure that you're not above this line right here. So I'm gonna take my finger and make sure that I'm not above that, because our board is gonna be sitting there and you don't wanna have that board off kilter. Now we need to get this thing wired up. We're gonna run these wires down into this corner. Now make sure when you bend these, you're not pulling against these potentiometers and those pins right there, because you don't want to mess up your solder joint. You don't want to break those pins. So I just like to take my tweezers and I'll twist like that, just so I'm not putting any kind of pressure on those pins. And we're gonna run all these wires down the side right here. So that looks good, just like that. I'm gonna run a strip of glue. So get this fixed again. Run a strip of glue right across here. Just to keep everything nice and tidy. Looks good. Okay. put this on top. And now we need to get all this soldered up. So let's look at this circuit board. Since I cut these traces out, it's kind of hard to tell on here, but over here, there's resistors on the other side of this board, and each one of these represents a direction. So it's actually going to go up, down, left, right, in that order right there. So let's get that done first. So up, we color coded to blue. So we're gonna pull that blue up. Now you're gonna have a little bit of room to work with here, right in this corner, if you need to bring that up right there. You don't wanna shove anything through this hole, because actually that's a mounting hole. So I'm going to run this up, and we're gonna solder that there. There's one. Next one's gonna be down, so we're gonna take that purple one next. That's good. Okay, so now that we got our up and our down done, I am actually gonna do select next. So we got select right here, and this wire is actually our select wire. So if you trace this circuit out, and it's kind of hard to tell. I wish I would have done this before I soldered, you know, these two down. But I'm gonna trace this over, and then that's gonna go right here, and then we're gonna follow that right to there. So that's our select signal. So we're gonna wanna tap into that circuit right there. Fold this up, and we'll just loop it right up to there. I always like to leave a little bit of excess just in case we gotta take this apart or snip that. That's good. So believe it or not, power is actually brown on here, and we can trace this circuit out. Trace that up, and what do you know, it's this first one right here. So we can bring power to that. Now I'm actually going to tuck this underneath the board so that later if we got to take it apart, see how we can tip that up like that. So I'm going to throw that down there and then tuck it up underneath. Looks good. And then give it a little slack, and what do you know, I cut that at a pretty decent length, one that I can live with. So okay, so the only thing to finish this up is we need to get our left and our right. Let's get these last ones in here. It's a good length. I don't know if you can hear my dogs in the background making a bunch of noise. What are you guys doing, huh? Are you bored because Dad's making a YouTube video? What's up, puppies? What? What? Whoa, 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 whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Yeah! What? 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 Do you need to go outside? You gotta go pee-pee? Alright. Just to keep this away from the other one, I'll bring this up through here and run it just like that. So. All right, and that's what it looks like completed. The next step is to get the top portion done. All right, so this is really important. Make sure that you label the orientation of this piece right here. So I'm gonna make a line right here. And I'm gonna make a line on the actual piece. Okay, and then I know I'll put a little line right there, one that you'll never even be able to see. So let's open this up. It just pops open. Oh, see how disgusting these are? Dirt and grime and everything. Yeah, these get really gross. Wow, this is one of the nastier ones I've seen. Gnarly. Thanks, eBay. Alright, so I put a little line on the side there. And I'm gonna actually put it on the inside too once I get this all cleaned up. Alright, that's good enough. So let's find that line we made right there, and then we'll put that on the inside as well. There we go, just a little scratch right there. The reason that line is so important is we actually only need this piece right here. But there's a way that this is oriented inside of here and it can rotate, because this actually is shaped very uniquely for this controller. So we need to make sure that we get that lined up. So I'm gonna put that line back where it's supposed to go. And then I'm gonna take all these buttons out. Just flip it over, move that off to the side. Make sure that line is in the right spot. Flip this over, and then we're in the right spot here. So I want to make sure that these buttons are in the correct spot. So that up, down, left, and right. Just looking at it again, I'm going to eyeball it. I'm going to center this piece and put some hot glue. There, and we'll put a little bit right there. Don't melt the top of your controller. Don't shove that tip of that glue gun into the plastic, because you can melt it. All right, so that's dried. Good enough. Let's flip this back over. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna hot glue the inside of this piece in here without having it really come up over this lip. So these little clips are actually holding this in place. So I'm gonna run a bead of hot glue all along the inside right here, and I'm gonna do it kind of quickly so that not any overflows or anything like that. Let's wait for that to dry. I like to take my finger, make sure none of it got up over that lip. Make sure you didn't get any on the inside, because our slider is actually going to be going back in there. We'll flip this back over. Now that the inside of here is pretty much dry, we can pop these two little placeholders off. Just kind of hit that with your fingernail. Great. Now that's mounted right there. So that looks good. So we need to have one of these. This is an Xbox One controller nub. I got red. I got this off of eBay. And you also need your slider. We need to drill a hole through the center of this. And the hole needs to be just big enough to go over the stick, but not so big that it flops around. Luckily for us, we got this little tube right in there. Can you see that? I always go right through the center of that. Oh, this needs to be cleaned up too. Man, these get nasty. Nasty, nasty. Alright, so I like to hit that pilot hole just with this because it's a little bit easier to use than a drill. And if we look, this doesn't fit on here. So I have a drill bit. It's the perfect size. right here. So I'm just going to drill that out off camera. All right. Now that fits on there pretty good. It's a little snug, so I'm actually going to waller that out a little bit more, because you want it to be able to spin on there, and that looks really nice. I like how that feels. So that's good. The next step is we got to get this analog nub to fit on there. We actually have to cut this round piece completely off. So I'll take these cutters again and cut her down. Okay, and I wanted to show you something. So I got the outside cut off, but if you look, we got this kind of frame that sits underneath there, and this actually hinders us from moving left and right. The way that you can get full movement out of these things is actually to cut that out of there as well. Just clean up these edges a little bit. Okay, good. Now if you see, when that sits on there, yeah, there's a little bit of a gap, but that allows it to go left and right and for that slider to stay stationary. I didn't mention either that this is actually sitting upside down, and that's convenient because that little dip in there allows that analog stick somewhere to go when you're going left and right. So let's put this all back together and then go ahead and test it out. All completed, looking really, really nice. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. All right, let's test this bad boy out. Okay, so I designed this for overhead games, so let's go ahead and try Jackal. Now, the cool thing about this is you can select with select. That's great, but since we got that wired up to the analog stick, you can select that just by pressing down. I believe Kickmaster is one that uses the select button on a regular basis, so let's just go with one player. And let's check this out. Right, left, up, down, diagonal, 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 diagonal. It works. Let's run this guy over. Yeah. All right. So super cool. You know, you got your turbo buttons down here. If I can reach it with one hand. Little burst fire, and then your. All right, but yeah, this one works great. I really like the way these play. I am going to be selling these on eBay. I'm also going to be selling them at Missouri Game Con this year, so 2018 Missouri Game Con. I'll be there probably on Saturday, so I'll be selling these. But thanks for watching my video. Have a nice day.